Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast. If I had to name the question I get asked more than any other, stopped on the street at the end of a lecture, in the comments underneath just about everything I post online, it would be some version of this. How do I get more deep sleep? How do I boost my deep non-rapid eye movement sleep or push up that deep sleep score my watch shows me every morning? It's a fair question to ask, but let me offer one small caveat right at the start, because I think it matters. Deep sleep is not the most important stage, and it isn't the best one. Your dreaming rapid eye movement sleep and even the lighter stage 2 non-rapid eye movement sleep are every bit as important. They simply do different jobs for your brain and body at different times of the night. So this isn't about chasing one stage at the expense of the others. It's just that deep sleep is the one people ask me about most and the one doing a particular kind of quiet, heavy maintenance overnight. So tonight, that's where we'll gently put our attention. And the good news is that almost everything which moves it comes down to fairly ordinary things you do tonight. No gadgets to buy, no machines from a laboratory, things already within your reach, most of them free, and each one backed by a number I can hand you as we go. Before the answer, though, let me show you the strangest way to get more deep sleep. And I'm sharing it mostly so you'll know never to use it. Stay up all night, properly, no sleep at all, and the following night your brain will sleep deeper than usual. Not longer, deeper. The slow, heavy delta waves roll harder and thicker than they have in weeks, which sounds, on the face of it, like a wonderful shortcut. It isn't one. And understanding why tells you almost everything about how deep sleep actually works. That rebound is simply the sound of a debt being repaid. All day, while you're awake, a molecule called adenosine builds up in the brain. Adenosine is one of the great signals of sleep pressure. The longer you're up, the more it piles on. The heavier the eyelids, the greater the push towards sleep. When you finally lie down, the brain settles that pressure first, and it pays in the currency of deep, non-rapid eye movement sleep. Deprive yourself, and the bill comes due with interest. But chronic short sleep doesn't just collect the interest. It fragments the night, unsettles the metabolism, and slowly wears down the very systems deep sleep exists to restore. Sleep deprivation isn't a protocol. It behaves a little more like a loan shark. So here's how I want to lay this out. I'm going to give you two lists. First, the things to lean into and do more of, the builders. Then, the things to do less of or abstain from, the saboteurs. And one thread ties the whole night together. Deep sleep is fragile. It thins with age, and it is front-loaded. Most of your night supply arrives in the first 2 or 3 cycles, the couple of hours right after you fall asleep. Think of it as a tide that comes in hardest at the very start of the night. Disturb those first hours and the water never quite rises that high again. Protect the front of the night and you've done most of the work. Start with what may be the biggest lever of all and the one most of us overlook: regularity. Deep sleep is built on sleep pressure. Sleep pressure is organized by a clock, and a clock only works if it's kept. In a healthy adult, slow wave sleep makes up somewhere around 13 to 23% of the night, weighted heavily toward the beginning. But that architecture assumes a body that knows when night is coming. Let your bedtime drift by a couple of hours and the signal blurs, and the brain stops laying down its deep sleep in those clean early blocks. So pick a wake time and try to hold it, weekends included, and give yourself a genuine 7 to 9 hour window. That one habit will quietly do more for your deep sleep than anything you can swallow, plug in, or strap to your head. The takeaway: a steady wake time and a full 7 to 9 hour window. Next, the daytime lever: move your body. Exercise raises sleep pressure, steadies the circadian rhythm, and helps the body handle its own temperature. Pool the controlled trials, and regular movement improves sleep quality, shortens the time it takes to fall asleep, and can lift slow wave sleep itself. Aim for a couple of 100 minutes of moderate movement across the week with a little resistance training. The old rule to keep all exercise far from bedtime has softened. On average, evening exercise doesn't seem to harm sleep and can even nudge deep sleep upward, with one exception: vigorous, heart-pounding effort in the final hour before bed, which can push sleep onset back. So it's usually enough to finish the hard work an hour or more before lights out. The takeaway: move your body most days and leave the hardest efforts at least an hour before bed. Slightly strange invitation for you. Tonight, before you brush your teeth, turn the tube around and actually read the label, because most of us have become fairly thoughtful about what we eat, what we drink, and what we put into our bodies. But then twice a day, every day, we put toothpaste in our mouths without giving the ingredient list a second thought. That was the thing that made me pause. Redmond Leaf is a toothpaste I really like and has become a household standard because it takes a much simpler mineral-based approach. It is fluoride-free and made without artificial flavors, dyes, or harsh chemicals. Instead of fluoride, it uses microhydroxyapatite, a mineral naturally found in tooth enamel and used in oral care to help support enamel strength. It also includes Redmond bentonite clay for gentle polishing, plus xylitol and erythritol for natural sweetness. And importantly, it still feels like real toothpaste: smooth, creamy, fresh, not gritty or strange, which is why it is easy to keep using. It comes in wild mint, citrus rosemary, and orange vanilla. My personal favorite is wild mint. It's pitch perfect in terms of the flavoring. So, ladies and gentlemen, all you need to do is go to redmond.life/Walker and use code WALKER to get 15% off your first order. That's redmond.life/Walker, code WALKER, for 15% off your first order. I really do recommend giving them a try. Then the loveliest move of the night, and it's a gentle paradox. To cool the brain for deep sleep, you warm the body first. As sleep approaches, your core temperature has to fall, and that fall is part of the machinery that starts and holds the deep stage. In fact, your core temperature reliably begins to drop about 2 hours before you fall asleep. And that first bout of deep non-rapid eye movement sleep tends to land right at the steepest point of that temperature slide. A warm bath or shower opens the blood vessels at the skin's surface, and when you step out, your body sheds heat through that opened skin, and your core temperature drops further and faster than it would have alone. It's rather like throwing open the windows of an overheated house. The warmth rushes out through the skin, and the core, at last, cools. The hot bath, quietly, is really a cooling device. And it has been measured again and again. Pool the controlled trials of before-bed water heating and warming yourself in water of around 40 to 42.5 degrees Celsius. That's 104 to 109 Fahrenheit, 1 to 2 hours before bed for as little as 10 minutes, significantly shortens the time it takes people to fall asleep. And the window is more forgiving than people assume. Across the wider literature, warming the body anywhere from 1 to 8 hours before bed reliably increases slow-wave sleep and deepens your non-rapid eye movement sleep. You don't even need much of a temperature shift for the brain to notice. In one exquisite experiment, researchers raised people's skin temperature by just 0.4 of a single degree Celsius, an amount you'd never consciously feel. And in older adults, that whisper of warmth almost doubled the proportion of slow-wave sleep and dropped the chance of waking too early in the morning from 58% to 4%. And here's a detail that reframes the whole thing. The best predictor of how fast you fall asleep isn't the room. It's whether the blood vessels in your hands and feet have opened to let heat escape. Warm feet, in the title of one paper in Nature, promote the rapid onset of sleep. In newborns, a wide enough temperature gradient from the core out to the skin made them 3 times more likely to fall asleep within half an hour. So this is why the old advice about socks in bed actually holds up. Warm feet help the core shed heat. Then, once you're warm, let the room itself be cool. Somewhere in the mid-60s Fahrenheit, around 18 to 20 degrees Celsius with breathable bedding. The takeaway: a warm bath 1 to 2 hours before bed, warm feet, then a cool, dark room. Light works right alongside temperature because deep sleep is strongest when the circadian rhythm is strong, and light is the master dial that sets it. Researchers once tracked melatonin, the hormone that announces biological night. Ordinary room light under 200 lux, the kind of glow you're very likely sitting in right now, pushed the rise of melatonin later in 99% of people. And it shortened the hormone's nightly window by about 90 minutes. And sleeping with even a faint light left on in the room measurably lowers deep slow-wave sleep and raises nighttime arousals. So do 2 small, free things. In the last hour or 2 before bed, dim everything. And in the morning, do the opposite. Get outdoors into daylight in the first hour after waking. Bright mornings, dim evenings. Food moves the needle more than most of us expect, and the timescale is the surprising part. It isn't your diet over years, it's what you ate today. In one crossover study, healthy adults were fed a controlled diet, and then for 1 day allowed to eat freely. The more fiber a person ate, the more deep, slow-wave sleep they got. The more saturated fat, the less of it. And the more sugar, the more often they surfaced into fragmenting arousals. Timing matters too. In another study, a carbohydrate-rich meal eaten 4 hours before bed cut the time it took people to fall asleep from 17.5 minutes to 9, a 49% reduction, almost in half. But the very same meal eaten just 1 hour before bed lost most of that benefit. And remember why falling asleep faster matters here. Deep sleep is front-loaded, so every minute you save at the start of the night is a minute of that early, deep, rich window you actually get to keep. The takeaway: favor fiber over saturated fat and sugar and finish your main meal a few hours before bed. Now, one you might not expect on a sleep podcast: sex and intimacy before bed. And before a single number, I want to say something plainly and mean it. Yes, in the data, it is the orgasm that appears to be the active ingredient, the piece most tightly linked to the improvement in people's sleep. But I am not saying that intimacy has to be about reaching orgasm. Sex and closeness do not need orgasm as their central goal or their finish line. The connection, the touch, the simple calm of being close to another person that carries its own worth entirely apart from where it does or doesn't lead. So please take the orgasm finding as useful information, not as a target you must hit. With that said, here is what the data show. In one survey of nearly 800 adults, 71% said that sex with a partner ending in orgasm improved their sleep, and only 3 to 6% said it made sleep worse. Solo also counted, as masturbation with orgasm improved sleep for 54%. Now, an honest asterisk on those numbers. These studies measured the subjective quality, not deep, non-rapid eye movement sleep, traced directly on an electrode. And yet it isn't a reckless leap to join the two together. When you line up how people rate a night's sleep against what the electrodes actually recorded, the depth of that sleep keeps surfacing near the top of the list. It isn't unanimous across every study, I should say, but it's a fair evidence-guided bet that at least part of what people are feeling is deeper sleep. The likely machinery is a gentle post-orgasm neurochemical wash, oxytocin up, the stress hormone cortisol down, and a rise in prolactin, a naturally sedating hormone. The takeaway: intimacy before bed is a genuine free wind down, and the closeness matters as much as the finish. And do give the mind a runway. Arousal is deep sleep's quiet enemy. A racing head will hold your brain out of stable, slow-wave sleep, no matter how dark and cool the room is. So build a small buffer, a protected half hour between the day and the bed. 10 or 20 minutes of slow breathing, a body scan, a few pages of a paper book under low light. The particular practice matters far less than simply doing it. You're offering the brain a slope instead of a cliff. The takeaway: give your mind a buffer, a gentle slope into sleep, not a cliff. And the most important do of all, treat the two conditions that undo everything else. If you snore loudly, wake gasping, or feel unrefreshed after a full night in bed, please get evaluated for sleep apnea, because an airway that keeps closing pulls your brain up out of the deep water hundreds of times a night, and no bath or supplement will fix that. And if you lie awake with chronic insomnia, the strongest tool we have isn't a pill. It's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which retrains the brain to sleep efficiently and, unlike sedatives, can genuinely rebuild your deep sleep. Those two aren't the alternative option. They're the first one. The takeaway: if apnea or insomnia is in the picture, treat it first. It outranks everything else here. A long-standing partner of today's podcast is Element, spelled LMNT. Element is a sugar-free electrolyte drink mix, and for me, it was the sugar-free part that made me start using it a while back. And again, I buy my own supply just to stay objective. Beyond having the electrolytes in the right balance, the other reason I'm a fan of Element is that it's scientific. If you look up the people who created the company, you'll find some pretty heavy-hitting physiology, biochemistry, and pharmacology knowledge baked into the product. And again, all of that comes without any sugar. Now, here's the update. Element's lemonade salt flavor, which used to be seasonal, was so popular that it's now permanent. You can get it year-round. Happily, I badgered them, and they have agreed to give you fine folks a free 8-count sample pack with any purchase of Element if you use the link drinklmnt.com/Matt Walker. So for free product with your purchase, just visit drinklmnt.com/Matt Walker. And as I said, you'll get some free product. Now we'll turn to the saboteurs. Let's start with the drug most of us reach for without a second thought: caffeine. It's a wonderful thing if you want to be awake, and rather less wonderful if you want deep sleep because of how it works. It doesn't drain your sleep pressure. It simply blocks the receptors that let your brain feel it. The pressure is still there. You've just unplugged the gauge, and it lingers with a half-life of about 5 to 7 hours in most of us. There's one study I keep coming back to, and it may change your afternoon. Researchers gave people 400 milligrams of caffeine, think a couple of strong coffees, at 3 different times, right at bedtime, 3 hours before bed, and a full 6 hours before bed, double-blind, placebo-controlled with a monitor recording each night. And the finding is a quietly sobering one. At every single timing, caffeine cut total sleep by more than an hour, somewhere between 66 and 72 minutes, compared with placebo, not just at bedtime. Even the dose taken 6 hours before bed, the one you'd assume had worn off, still cost more than an hour of sleep and measurably reduced slow-wave sleep. Sit with that for a moment. A coffee at 2 or 3 in the afternoon may still be close enough to bedtime to shallow your deepest sleep, so it's worth setting yourself a curfew. For most people, nothing after early afternoon, earlier if you're sensitive, anxious, older, pregnant, or a slow metabolizer. And do remember, it hides in a great many places: tea, soda, energy drinks, pre-workout, chocolate, even some painkillers. The takeaway: set a caffeine curfew. For most of us, nothing after early afternoon. Now to the one I get asked about most: alcohol. And alcohol is perhaps the great impersonator of sleep. Here is the trick it plays. Pool every controlled study of alcohol in healthy sleepers, and at every dose, a drink does 3 things. It helps you fall asleep a little faster. It makes the first half of your night look calmer and more consolidated, and then it quietly wrecks the second half. So the person who swears their nightcap works is telling the truth about the first half of the film. They're just not seeing the second. Now let me give you the 3 dials that decide how bad it gets. The first dial is dose, and it's close to a straight line. A genuinely small amount, think blood alcohol around 0.03%, a single drink, may barely register on the sleep of a healthy person. But push it up toward 0.10% and alcohol starts behaving like a short-acting sleeping pill in the first half, followed by a rebound of lighter, broken sleep as your body clears it. And it delays your first dream sleep of the night at every dose, suppressing more and more REM the higher you go. The second dial is timing. You might assume that if you finish your drink early, you're safe. Not quite. In one study, people were given alcohol a full 6 hours before bed. By the time they lay down, a breathalyzer read exactly 0. Every last molecule metabolized, gone, and yet the sleep was still disrupted. Wakefulness in the second half of the night doubled. The disruption outlived the drink. Earlier is less bad than later, yes. The same dose taken close to bedtime within an hour hammers the front of your night far harder than a dose taken several hours earlier. But earlier is not the same as harmless. And the third dial is the one people most want a loophole on: the type of drink. Wine, beer, spirits, the expensive stuff, the organic stuff. I'm sorry to report there's no loophole here. It's the ethanol that does this, not the beverage. No wine, no beer, no spirit has been shown to be kinder to your sleep. Now let me show you what alcohol is doing underneath the surface, because this is where it stops being about grogginess and starts being about your body. Start with the heart. Even at moderate amounts, below what anyone would call heavy drinking, evening alcohol speeds your heart rate all night. In one careful dose-response study, a low dose ran the nighttime heart about 4% faster than an alcohol-free night, and a higher dose ran it about 14% faster. At the same time, it suppressed the calming vagal brake on the heart, blunted the reflexes that steady your blood pressure, and tipped the body toward its stress branch, the sympathetic side. And in women, blood pressure climbed in the early morning hours. We often call sleep a cardiovascular holiday, the one long stretch where the heart gets to rest. Alcohol cancels the holiday, and deep, non-rapid eye movement sleep is meant to be the calmest cardiovascular window of the entire day, so this lands squarely on the deep stage. Then there's the hormone. Alcohol suppresses the night's release of growth hormone, your overnight repair crew, by around 70 to 75%, while leaving the stress hormone cortisol untouched. And that great pulse of growth hormone isn't released at random. It rides on the back of your first deep, non-rapid eye movement cycle. So a 70% fall is, in effect, a receipt for deep sleep that was chemically muffled. And then there's your memory. In a study of learning and sleep, a drink before bed cut the dream sleep of the first half of the night sharply. The minutes of rapid eye movement sleep fell by anywhere from around 70% to over 90%. And that rapid eye movement sleep turned out to be doing something. People who learned a task and then drank alcohol even 2 nights later still lost the memory, because the alcohol robbed them of the rapid eye movement sleep that would have cemented it into place days after the lesson. The drink didn't just cost them a night, it reached back and erased the learning. So put the 3 dials together: dose, timing, type, and the guidance is simple. If you drink, keep the amount modest, finish 3 to 4 hours before bed rather than right before, and know that no type of drink buys you a pass. And if you want the best deep sleep you're capable of, keep the alcohol out of the evening altogether. Today's episode is sponsored by Square, and this is one I'm genuinely happy to talk about because I actually use it. I've sold books at events more times than I can count: signings, conferences, pop-up tables in the back of a room, and Square is what I reach for every single time. It's seamless. You tap, chip, Apple Pay, whatever the person's got, and it just works. No fumbling, cash only, No awkward line building up while someone digs for their wallet. I set it up and I'm taking sales in minutes. Another reason I chose Square is that it's not just fast, it's smart. No contracts, no hidden fees, no complicated setup. You can see your sales and inventory in real time, and Square Banking even lets you get to your earnings quickly instead of waiting around. It scales whether you're selling from one table or running a whole business. Businesses using Square Online earn 36% more revenue on average, and 77% of invoices get paid within a day of being sent. For me, it just makes selling feel easy, and when you're at an event trying to actually talk to people, easy is everything. So if you're ready to make getting paid the simplest part of your day, get up to $200 off Square hardware when you sign up at square.com/go/MattWalker. That's square.com/go/MattWalker. One more time, it's square.com/go/MattWalker. Then there's the one many of you are quietly wondering about, cannabis. And the honest picture is a little more disappointing than the marketing. THC can help you fall asleep, and for a night or two, it may even lift deep sleep. But tolerance builds within about a week, and then it turns, suppressing dream sleep and fragmenting the night. The largest real-world study of its kind followed more than 2,000 patients on prescribed medical cannabis, many of them specifically for insomnia over 3 months. Their pain, anxiety, fatigue, and overall quality of life all improved. And their sleep? On the standard sleep disturbance scale, it barely moved, essentially no change at all. The one thing most of them came for was the one thing that didn't budge. As for CBD, at the low doses in most gummies, it's more likely to do nothing than to help. In a placebo-controlled crossover, researchers gave THC together with CBD, and the CBD didn't deepen sleep. It did the opposite. At the higher dose, 15 milligrams of THC with 15 of CBD, the time spent awake in the night rose from about 17 minutes to 41. That's a 140% jump, more than double. And rapid eye movement sleep fell by around a quarter. The takeaway, and it's a caution, don't rely on THC or CBD to build your deep sleep. And last on the less list, the gadgets, the pills, and the supplement shelf. There's a real frontier where scientists amplify slow waves directly with weak currents through the scalp or precisely timed sounds. In the laboratory, it works, but for now, it belongs in the laboratory. And the same goes for the consumer headbands chasing it. There are prescription drugs that raise slow wave sleep, and they belong with a physician and a reason. And the sedation of an old sleeping pill is not the same as real, natural deep sleep. Being unconscious is not the same as sleeping deeply. Even the supplements, glycine or magnesium if you're genuinely deficient, sit near the bottom of the list, with small effects next to the giants. If your magnesium is already normal and you take more, you're mostly just paying for rather expensive urine. The takeaway, leave the gadgets, the pills, and the supplement shelf until last. So let's add it all up. First, the things to lean into and do more of. 1, regularity, a steady wake time, and a full 7 to 9 hour window. Let the brain lay down its deep sleep in clean, front-loaded blocks, the richest 13 to 23% of the night. 2, exercise, moving most days. Regular training can raise your slow wave sleep, as long as you leave the hardest efforts an hour before bed. 3, warm bath and warm feet, 1 to 2 hours before bed into a cool room. Gentle warming nearly doubled deep sleep in older adults and cut early morning waking from 58% to 4%. 4, light, bright mornings, dim evenings. Ordinary room light delays melatonin in 99% of people, and darkness protects the deep sleep it erodes. 5, food. Fiber over saturated fat and sugar, main meal a few hours out, more fiber tracks with more deep sleep, and a meal 4 hours before bed had people asleep about 49% faster. 6. Sex and intimacy. A pre-sleep orgasm links to better sleep in 71% of people, though the closeness is worth just as much as the finish. 7. Winding down. A protected half hour that lowers the arousal which otherwise keeps you out of the deep stage. 8. Apnea and insomnia. Treated first. The therapy for insomnia rebuilds deep sleep a pill can't, and a blocked airway can pull you out of the deep stage hundreds of times a night. And the things to do less of or abstain from. 9. Caffeine. A curfew by early afternoon, even 6 hours before bed, 400 milligrams, cost more than an hour of sleep and cut slow wave sleep. 10. Alcohol, less of it, and finished 3 to 4 hours earlier. Alcohol speeds the heart up 14% all night, cuts growth hormone 70 to 75%, and can strip 70 to over 90% of your first half dream sleep. And no type of drink is kinder. 11. Cannabis, not to be leaned on. THC and CBD failed to build deep sleep, and a mix of the two more than doubled nighttime wakefulness. Deep sleep is not something you force, it's something you allow. It emerges when the pressure is high, the clock is steady, the body is cooling, the room is dark, the airway is open, and the mind is quiet. In that sense, it's less a switch than a garden. You can't shout at a garden to grow. You prepare the soil, pull the weeds, and give it water and light and darkness in the right amounts. And then, if you've done your part, growth simply happens. That's your brain's nightly restoration program. Memories stabilized, the body repaired, the metabolic ledger reset, the cleaning crew let in. Improve it, and you aren't only improving the night, you're improving the next day's brain. And quietly, over the years, perhaps the next decades. Thanks so much for listening. I really do appreciate you giving me your time and your ears. Look after yourself, enjoy every one of your waking hours, and when tonight comes, I hope it brings you the deepest, soundest sleep you're capable of. Bye for now.